welcome to day 2 of Black River Stages. This is Jayville Out. Jayville In was cancelled. We had non-rally traffic on stage, so red flag was thrown, etc., etc. This is 4.43 miles, stage 11. This is left 4 plus late. Thank you. So left 4, or this may be 100, left 4 plus late, into right 4 short over crest 30. But we'll find out. 15. 10. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go! Left 4 plus late. Into right 4 short over crest 30. Right 3 plus, no cut. Left 4 over small crest. Right 4 long. Left 4 plus short over small crest. Right 5. Into small crest, into left 4 plus 50.
Next.
Right 5. Into small jump 30. Left 3 plus very long, into small crest, into right 3 minus over small crest, into left 5 minus short, into small crest, into left 4 minus, 50, caution right 4 minus, tightens 3 minus over kick, into left 3 plus over crest, into right 4 plus over crest down, long, tightens, opens over jump. 70, left 4 plus, there's your jump. Opens. Left 4 plus. Into right 5 minus short over small crest, left 3 plus, no cut over crest. Into right 5 minus, no cut. Left 5 minus. Right 4 plus short, into left 5 short, into return right 4 short, into left 5 short 30, right 4 minus, into left 6 plus, crest, left 4 minus over small crest, long over small crest, into right 3, no cut. 70, left 5 plus,
Next.
into right 5 plus over small crest, and double caution left 5 short over jump, tightens 3. Tightens 3. Into right 4 minus over bridge, 50. Left 4 minus over long crest, opens 30. Right 3 minus long. Into left 3 minus long, 150. Right 4 plus long, opens over crest 100.
Say again.
Right 4 plus long, opens over crest 100. Left 6 plus. Repeat left 6 plus, into right 4 plus 50. Left 6 plus, into small crest, into right 6, 120.
Next.
Right 5 minus. Left 5 plus long. Right 6, very long over a small crest, 50. Left 4, 30. Right 5 plus, very long, tightens 4 minus onto tarmac over bridge. Repeat, tightens 4 minus onto tarmac over bridge. Left 5 over small crest over bumps, into right 5 plus onto dirt 70. Stay right over small crest 30, left 4 plus long, tightens 4 minus over crest 30. Small crest. Into right 3 plus no cut. Repeat, right 3 plus no cut, long. Stay left over small crest, 30. Right 3 minus, no cut, long, into small crest. Into left 5, tightens 3. Repeat, 5, tightens 3. Into right 4 plus, long, over crest. Right 6 over small crest.
Next.
Into left 3, very long. Right 3 opens, long, over small crest. Into jump 30, right 6 plus, no cut. Left 6 plus, into right 6 plus, left 6 plus, over small crest 30, and a caution right 3 plus over crest. This is left 6 plus, then you have a caution right 3 plus over crest. Into left 4 plus, long, opens, 50. Left 5 plus, long, 30. Small crest, right 4 plus, into left 4. Small crest 30, left 5, 70. Left 5 minus, into right 3 plus, tightens. Into left 5 plus, 180. Left 5 minus, over crest 70. Stay left over crest, over finish 70. Left 5 plus. Into crest, into left 5 short, narrow down. Okay. Into right 4 plus, opens.
That was fabulous.
Yeah. Good job.
Done you. Ooh, felt really good.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Car felt great.